Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, episode 42, Bob and Aelriss. In order for the podcast to continue, I really need more guests to volunteer to be on the show. So if you're interested, or if you know someone who is interested, please go to gocorral.com/STS to learn more about how to apply to be on the show. That's GOCORRAL.com/STS. Today I'm here with Bob, who has done a lot of different creative things, and we're going to talk about mostly D&D stuff, but whatever comes across the table we'll discuss. So, hi, Bob.
Hey there. I'm really excited to be here. I've been looking forward to jumping on this show ever since I heard about it. So
Yeah,
glad to be here.
great. Well, we always start off by asking who you are outside of D&D and RPGs. So, give us the who is Bob spiel.
Yeah. So I'm a author, podcaster, and indie game designer from South Alabama. I am best known as the author of the Jubal County Saga, which is a rural urban fantasy book series about a redneck wizard with a crippling meth addiction. So, and then by day, I'm a technical writer. So, yeah,
Gotcha.
that's me
Cool.
in a nutshell.
Yeah, my dad was a technical writer too, so I'm familiar with the field. He's retired
Yeah,
now.
I aspire to be.
Yes.
It's not the most exciting work, but I always wanted to write for a living, and now I am.
Yeah, yeah, and you get to do both halves. You get the technical instruction manual part and the more creative, fun writing.
Yeah, yeah.
Is
So
Jubal County set in like modern times with the meth addiction, or is it like a little
it
bit?
is. It
Oh,
is.
okay.
It is. I'm from Crenshaw County, Alabama, and Jubal County is Crenshaw County with the serial numbers filed off and a name change
Okay. Yeah,
to
that's
protect the innocent. So, but it is a intensely rural county, as the most dirt roads of any county in the state of Alabama,
wow.
and the I had 44 people in my graduating class. So, give you an
Okay.
idea of pretty remote.
Yeah, I had about 500, so yes, I
Yeah.
get the feeling.
Yeah,
All right. Then it's got magic as part of it as well.
it does.
Is this like the hidden style magic of like Harry Potter, where like all the Muggles
Yes.
don't know about it? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not quite as hidden as that. It because it's one of those. His grandmother, Granny, is especially one of the older people of the county, well known as you know, a wise woman. But she's very, very mean, very nasty. For the most part, the way I've written it is humans have a built-in safety device, basically,
Uh-huh.
that they avoid, that they subconsciously avoid anything supernatural. Uh, so one example he gives is like if any house that people popularly tell you is haunted, it's not, because if it was actually popularly haunted, people would avoid it just subconsciously. Uh, so he tells, he's looking for someone who's missing, and he says, let's look for the place where no one goes, and it's because they're avoiding it for some reason, um, perhaps supernatural, and that kind of leads him down the path to solving one of his mysteries.
Okay.
So, uh, and it's one of those. The more you get exposed to it, the more it stays exposed to you. It's once you see it, it sees you back, kind of deal.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I was
uh,
gonna ask about that because I think the Percy Jackson series also had like the mist that
mhm.
made it so supernatural things seemed normal to most people until they had crossed that veil, and then everything seemed supernatural once you were able to see like your first thing.
Yeah. In this case, it's there's no mist like that. It's just uh, most supernatural things don't want to be seen, and
Hmm.
then on the occasions that they are, people tend to just their mind kind of blanks it out. So those who actually do magic, they of course see, you know, their mind is attuned, I guess you could say, and
Mhm.
so they have no issues with seeing the supernatural if they can guide people into it. Basically, because they can see where the supernatural is, they can basically, hey, no, look, and they can expose people to kind of jumpstart them, getting them sunk into the magical realm, I guess you
Mhm.
could say.
Yeah, that makes
Uh,
sense.
but for the most part, they don't. They kind of keep it at least somewhat hidden. But my guy, my main character's name is Howard Marsh. Um, he doesn't really care about keeping anything secret because he just knows that no one's going to believe anything about it because he is a well-known hoodlum and meth addict. So
Okay, yeah. So I'm assuming that while I'm mentioning young adult pieces as touchstones, that because of the content of yours, that it is not
yeah,
the older target audience.
yeah, I get asked at conventions, they'll be, oh, can my kid read this? I was like, and what I tell people is, it's really like 16 and up, and you need to be a pretty cool 16-year-old. Um,
Yeah.
there's a bit of violence. There actually there's a good number of horror elements to it. I started out as a horror author,
Uh-huh.
and so there are some kind of dark moments that I really amp up the horror aspects. Um, but oh, and cursing, he cusses like a sailor. So that's all not great for a 12-year-old. But that said, there's not a lot of sex in it, and what sex does occur, it's very much fade to black, so you don't really see anything. So it is, if you let your kid watch, the Jason movies or you know the Freddy movies, anything like that. If they've seen that, then my books are no worse than that. So
Maybe Breaking Bad might be a better comparison with the drug content.
yeah, and I don't. Yeah, I think that would actually be a pretty good comparison because I think no one going in who finishes Breaking Bad is like, man, drugs are great.
Yeah.
Um, and I definitely don't glorify drug use. I make it very clear that drugs have absolutely wrecked his life. Uh, and when he when drugs are consumed, it is typically done off camera, as it
Oh.
were. Um, you don't see the use, but you do see the effects. So, because he was never trained, he never received any real training due to reasons. He eventually learned that he could basically, when he takes drugs, he can use that kind of drug fueled manic energy to fuel his magic.
Oh, okay.
So, so that has kind of become like his crutch that kind of at least partially evens the playing field when he's dealing with more powerful or better trained supernatural entities. Just because he received a little bit of training up until he was 6, and then after that, nothing. So
It's like steroids. It's his performance enhancing drug.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's one of those, those who've been properly trained, they can draw on levels of power uh, that he just can't. He's never been trained how to like really tap into the source of magic, uh, and so because of that, he's like, oh, drugs.
All right. Well, it's a solution.
Yeah, it is. It is a terrible solution that very frequently goes very poorly for him.
And you said you've also created some RPGs in the past as well as part of your writing.
Yeah, as far back as I'd say middle school, I started designing games. I remember in like it was probably like fifth grade or so. National Geographic had a fold-out map of uh, the Baltic region, and I started taking that and turning it into a game. like a war game kind of deal,
Okay.
tabletop war game. Um, and so that was the first thing I really remember. And then all through, high school, and I tried designing little card games and things like that. When I got to college is when I discovered D&D, and my freshman year of college. I knew of it. I just had never encountered anyone who had actually played it. And so for the next, actually, right around then, me and some friends, this is the heyday of the D20 license. I started playing D&D pretty much like the month 3.5 came out.
Uh-huh.
And so a few of us tried to start a D20 company. We were going to make a source book for that. It went poorly because I was the only one who ever did any work on it, and we had no idea what we were doing anyway.
All right. Yeah.
And then I'd say around 5 years ago is kind of when I discovered the indie RPG scene, and especially discovering one-sheet RPGs. So since then, I've made around probably 30 one-sheet RPGs, and have made maybe 5 or 6 longer games. And now I have started taking my better ideas and really polishing them and getting them made into print zines through a small press I started called Bearded Bard Inkworks.
Uh-huh.
And so I have 3 out now, and I have 3 in varying stages of development. So by the end of the year, I'll have 6 24-page, paperback zines out there of different games and gaming content.
And have you done any collaborations with like bigger, I guess, depending on what we consider bigger? Like I know Kenzer does a few things like that in the KODT comic magazine, where you could potentially publish a whole one-shot kind of thing in there.
I did, and I hate myself. I can't remember the name of it. There's a guy who puts out I think it's monthly zine on Itch of just gaming content, and I had a game put in there. Right now, actually, this is not going to be for sale. This is going to be free content, but I am working with a author named Mortellus, and she plays RPGs but doesn't write RPGs. She writes. She's a necromancer, so she writes books about necromancy.
Okay.
I had an idea for some like just a supplemental system, system neutral system that involves taking coins from the eyes of the dead and using it to gain necromantic abilities short term.
Okay.
I'm working with them to make that. It'll be coming out sometime soonish. I've written most of it. It's gone to her now to for her to come up with her side of the content, and then we'll put it out. But yeah, so for now, that's really it. I long ago got really turned off on working with people because I'm very much a got to strike with irons hot. I do a lot of stuff. I'm very, very, very busy.
Mm-hmm.
And if something really catches my interest, I go all in on it. And most folks don't operate that way. They need time, and a lot of times by the time that someone would eventually get around to doing it, I've lost interest in the project. So that said, Bearded Bard Inkworks, it publishes my all of my self-published novels and all my RPG content, but the royal we, I am over time going to work with authors that I'm friends with, that I've made connections with, that also like RPGs, and our differentiator as a small press is going to be that we publish books that have paired RPG content, so you can read the book and then you can play the book. Okay. So that is coming. Just gotta wait on the right project to fall into my lap. But my books will have RPG content. The first one is the zine I'm currently working on publishing. It's like 97% done. I'm kind of just doing last checks on it and making sure that it's formatted and looks pretty. Um, and so it is set in the world of Jubal County, but it is the core premise behind it is every so often Howard
Mhm.
Marsh gets strong armed by this shadowy government agency into solving some mystery for them. But because he's absolutely terrible, they only use him for like really small jobs. Uh,
Okay.
but he and they are very shadowy. He doesn't even know, all he knows is there's some sort of alphabet agency is what he calls them. Um, but they are actually uh, the CCC. If you know your American history, back in the New Deal,
Yep.
there was the CCC, the Civilian Construction Corps, that hired young men to go out to the woods in national parks and build trails and stuff. Well, it got shut down in like 1942 because World War II, all that manpower was needed uh, to be soldiers. But in this, the background story is that all these CCC crews, when they were going out to these national forests and building trails, they kept encountering cryptids. And so the CCC actually
All
continues
right.
as a like an off the books government agency that is now the Cryptid Containment Corps.
Okay.
And
So this is
so,
your Men in Black allegory.
yeah,
All right.
yeah. So it is a simple system for playing uh, games where you go out and hunt, uh, try to contain cryptids, however, by whatever means necessary, be it capture them or eliminate them or solve the friction of why they're coming into contact with
Mm.
humans.
Yeah.
And so that is will be the first game that comes out that is based on content from my books. Agent Rutherford is the bureau chief for Alabama, and so he's in there. And then there's a one page in there talks about, hey, you don't typically play as characters with magical abilities, but just be aware they do exist. Here's a couple, and it's a couple of characters from my books. So Howard
Okay.
Marsh and a guy named Grant Richmond. So
So that sounds a lot like the kind of like the Delta Green Cthulhu setting
yes,
stuff.
yeah. No, uh, I am intensely inspired by the works of H.P. Lovecraft to the point where I have half my leg is tattooed in Lovecraftian tentacles and horrors.
Cool.
Um, and so his world building to a degree has always been a big influence on me, and I just love anything eldritch horror.
Yeah, I think it's very influential for a lot of people and just sort of expands outward from there with other people.
Yeah, well, and it's also because it really benefited from more or less being in the public domain. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
no,
I guess that's true at this point.
so it when he died, there wasn't a clear executor on who actually controlled his literary estate. So that's why every board game does a Cthulhu expansion because it's basically public domain. As long as there's a couple things that aren't, but as long as you don't use those couple things, you can definitely use the Lovecraft mythos, and that I think has been a large reason why it's so popular. Is just so many people were able to play in that sandbox and spread it around.
Yeah. So the creation process for the games, because you've got like 35 of them
Hmm.
or more, I guess.
Yeah.
So do you kind of just sit down for a week and write it out? Is there a testing process? How does it?
Most of these one sheets I whip up in a day at most.
Uh-huh.
Because the thing about a one sheet RPG is um, they're not. No one plays them really for more than a session.
Yeah.
It's really just something that you just make a character in 30 seconds and go. And so and part of it, balance isn't really a concern. The idea is just have as much fun as you can in 2 or 3 hours off this one sheet of paper, and then you know probably never play it again, or
Yeah.
play it with a different group. Like me, I've played. My favorite is The Witch is Dead by Grant Howitt. That's my go-to one sheet RPG. So I've played that with a bunch of different groups, but it's not necessarily one that I'm going to play with the same group multiple times. So because of that, I don't really have to worry about balance. I don't really have to worry about leveling systems or how's this going to carry over for session after session. I really just have to take one very niche thematic idea and generate enough content that someone could have fun over the course of an evening.
Okay. So it's a bit more like a improv story guideline.
Almost, yeah. I mean, there are some limited rules there. There are hit points, there are dice mechanics. But for the most part, I just use a simple D6 system. I'd say probably 90% of the games I do, it's if you roll odd, it's a success. If you roll even, it's a failure. The higher the number, the better the success, or the worse the failure. And your characters typically get one or two or three keywords and maybe a piece or two of gear. And if your keywords or gear tie into what you're trying to roll for, you could roll two dice and choose which one to keep. So basically rolling with advantage.
Yeah. Gotta bring in the D&D terminology.
Yeah. So but that's basically the system, and it's so easy that you could teach anyone it in 15 seconds.
Well, yeah. How long was that?
Right. And that's essentially the game. Now, a lot of the games do have little rule sets. I did one called No Man's Land, but it's spelled with a G because it's gnomes.
Okay.
I love puns. So you play as lawn gnomes, and there's a mechanic there. The magic is not in the gnome; the magic is in the hat. And the color of your hat determines what kind of magic you have.
Okay.
And so you can trade hats to trade magic. So that's a slightly different system. I did one called The Rising Sun Sets in the West, and it's the premise behind it is that there was an alternate history. There's a massive earthquake that struck Japan, destroying much of Japan, and the refugees fled. Some of the refugees fled to California.
Okay.
It formed a couple of towns there, and so there's a mechanic in there for quick draw of either sword or pistol. And so there's a mechanic there for you to, if you want to do quick draw duels, just little things like that. So I do come up with little niche sub rule sets if it's fits the theme of the game. Another was I did one called Three Octopuses in a Trench Coat.
I saw that one.
Yeah, and I actually turned that one into like an 8-page zine that you can get for free off of the Bearded Bard Inkworks website, because the silly little premise behind Bearded Bard Inkworks is that no humans work there, or correction, no octopuses work there. It's definitely humans. It's not octopuses in top hats and fake mustaches.
Yes.
And so, so the idea here is that these three octopuses escaped an aquarium and started a book publisher. Well, that all came from this game I made about three octopuses that have been experimented on. So they're a little smarter than normal, and they're trying to escape this aquarium, and they find a trench coat, and so they're trying to escape. And in that, every time you try to do something, if you're like in the trench coat, all three players roll a d6, and it's not really high or low that determines success. It's how closely the numbers spread is on the three. How well are y'all acting in unison to achieve your goal? So if you roll three threes, man, you're on top of things. But if you roll a 3, a 4, and a 5, okay, you're getting there. But if you roll a 1, a 3, and a 6, well, guess what? Y'all are not in sync at all, and you're all goobered up. So that's kind of the mechanic there. So,
okay, that's really unique. I would not have thought of doing it that way.
Yeah, it probably doesn't really work all that well, but neither do three octopuses in a trench coat. So there you go. We're going for themes.
Yeah.
Over mechanics.
Have you seen the Octodad video game?
No, I haven't, but that sounds up my alley as a dad who loves octopuses.
The premise is that you're a octopus that is marrying into a human family and becoming the stepdad for these children, and then you have to do all these like mundane tasks while not giving away that you're an octopus wearing a suit.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, I need to look this up.
So you
Yeah.
have to like make them a sandwich or get them out of the trampoline and into the car. Um,
Yeah. I will definitely be checking this out.
yeah,
Because that sounds right up my alley.
yeah. I have not played it yet, but it's also on my plan to play with my kids because it looks
Yeah.
absolutely hilarious.
Yeah. No, that like I said, it's sounds right up my alley. So whenever we're done recording this, I'm probably gonna go look it up.
Yeah, let me know how it is too, because I
Yeah.
want to actually try it out. I think you said this earlier, but let's do it again. How did you get into RPGs initially?
So my first I get I dipped my toes into it through Vampire the Masquerade.
Hmm.
I cannot recall how I found out about it. But I bought a couple of the books, and in high school, me and my best friend, we made characters for it a few times, but we never played it because we could not wrap our head around how you actually played. Again, this is before YouTube. We couldn't go on there and watch people play these. Like,
Right.
and we had literally never known anyone who had played a tabletop role playing game.
Makes it harder.
Yeah, it does. So we had no idea how to do it. So we made characters a few times, Clan Brujah for life, and that was it. And then I got to college, and I had a huge crush on this woman, and I ran into her at a party, and we really hit it off. And as the party was winding down, she said, "Hey, why don't we go to Waffle House?" And I was like, sure, let's do it. So me and her, we go to Waffle House, and the reason why is because her boyfriend was the cook there, and that's when I found out she had a boyfriend. Uh, but her boyfriend played D&D and found out that I had never played, wanted to play, and he invited me to join his group like the next week. And so I went. They helped me make a rogue. I played one session there,
Uh-huh.
and then one of the guys who's in that invited me to his group as well. And he was running an evil campaign where I made a cleric. The next week, I went and bought the DM's guide, all the books, and I started running my own stuff. So I think I played two sessions before I ran my first campaign, and I've mostly been the DM ever since. So
So you've always been the DM. You just needed someone to show you how to do it just for a little tiny bit.
yeah, it's absolutely up my alley. And I'm not the best DM, I know for sure, but I am a pretty good DM. And so my players tend to have fun. And so I played 3.5 religiously for years. Bounced hard off of 4, and kind of even just quit playing there for a while. Kind of
Hmm.
shifted more to board games. Played a lot more board games
Yeah.
because it's just getting harder to have groups. And then fifth edition came around, and I started back playing D&D pretty decently heavily for someone in their late 20s, early 30s.
Uh-huh.
And then I just gotten tired of D&D. I'm kind of over it. And there's so many amazing other games out there. Not my games. My games are not amazing. My games are quirky and weird and fun, but they're not amazing. But there are some legitimately amazing games out there, and so I've been getting my players to kind of shift to trying other systems, other games, and we've been having a lot of fun with that. on the increasingly rare occasions we actually get to play.
Yes, the life with children.
Oh
Familiar
yeah,
with that problem.
yeah, we're steadily adding kids among our role playing game group, so makes it a little trickier every passing year.
You're still playing with mostly the same group as well?
Yeah, we I've had pretty much the same group now for 4 years now, 4 maybe even 5 years now,
Okay.
and one of those players, uh, he was in the very first session of the very first campaign I ever ran back in 2003.
That's cool.
So he's been playing with me for 2 decades now, um, off and on. Uh, and then the rest of them, I mean, they're all old friends of mine, and we finally just got settled enough that we could sometimes play as a group. And we're getting increasingly settled, and unfortunately, that's not translating to increasingly more playtime. And honestly, a lot of that's my fault. I'll own that. I tend to be the DM, and between podcasting and writing, I do a ton of conventions every year. I stay so busy that my kiddo is old enough that her existence never messes with us playing. Um,
Mhm.
she's never at fault. It's always me. I stay so busy. And then one of our core players, he had a schedule change at work. He's got this wonky, weird schedule that none of us can keep track of, and so
Mhm.
it makes it hard to plan in advance. And so
Yeah.
if we don't plan in advance, those slots fill up quick. So
Yeah.
eh,
You were talking about like wanting to have control over the process when you like have any creative idea for like
mhm.
making RPGs, was the focus there, but I feel like it also kind of applies to DMing where you're the one with the most control over the story that you're creating with people. Like whenever you have an idea, you can write it down right away and get started on it. But as a player, whenever you have an idea, you kind of sometimes you can't act on it for several sessions, let alone immediately, because you can only really act on player ideas in a session at all.
Absolutely. And I like playing occasionally, but I do not like playing in longer running campaigns.
Hmm.
I like getting a little break every now and then, but I really do. I enjoy the control, and I'll admit this is when it comes to DMing, I have an issue with for longer running campaigns. I get real interested in an idea. I go all in on it. I do tons of plotting, planning, get all going. We get 4 or 5 sessions in, and I start to lose interest in it. And I have a new idea that comes up, and oh, well, I'd really like to do this. And so uh, I used to be very, very bad about it, and my players were very kind and did not just, you know, beat me up. But when I was younger, I called it D&D ADD. I could keep a campaign going for about 6 sessions, and then now I got this cool idea, guys. Let's do this. Well, I eventually did. I had a campaign that ran for about almost, I guess, close to 2 years. And got them from 1 to 19.
That's big. That's about as big as
Yeah,
you can get, really.
yeah. Well, and the real the real kicker is one more session. We had one session left to go, and it would have got them to 20, and we never played it. I can't remember
Uh,
why, but we never played the final session. Um, so, oh well. But after that, I got a little better, and these days, part of why drifted away from D&D is because this allows me to really just embrace my D&D ADD in that, like, hey guys, let's play Morkborg. It's not going to take us hours to make a character. It's slightly more involved than a one-sheet RPG, perhaps, except that they're online generators that will give you a character in like 2 seconds. But um, is like, hey, let's play this. We'll have to take 20 minutes learning the rules, but we can play it for 3, 4, 5 sessions, get our scratch this itch, and then let's move on to something new. That now let's play Troika, or let's play Kids on Bikes, or let's play a session of Dread, something like that. That it gives me the variety of, oh, let's play a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
That's not, hey, every 2 months we have to learn how to play something as complex as D&D. No,
Yeah.
we don't have time for that. So
yeah, and I feel like once you've like a lot of the things that aren't as complex as D&D are very mechanically similar. Like they have their differences, but like Powered by the Apocalypse, Forged in the Dark are both almost the same system for how they resolve mechanical conflict.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All the Forged in the Dark comes off the Powered by the Apocalypse tree. It's just, like a great grandkid or whatever.
Yeah.
And so yeah. And then you have all the OSR games that all kind of very similar.
Those are all D&D, like they're
yeah, but a very much more simplistic version. And the thing about it is D&D kind of has to be designed in such a way that you can play all manner of different games with it to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
Something like Morkborg, you're playing one kind of game with Morkborg. You're playing bleak, over the top black metal in RPG format, and yeah, you're not going to want to do that for the rest of your life. But for a window in time, it's fantastic. Troika, you're wanting to play something a little quirky, weird, science fantasy, esoteric oddities. Cool, pretty simple session. Again, probably not something you're going to want to play for the rest of your life. But, and the other thing is, once you have played like 5 or 6 or 7 different systems, it just becomes that much easier to learn new ones, because it's just like, oh, well, you played Morkborg, the combat resolution is just like that, but character creation is a little bit more like Troika, and this game has, the spell system is kind of new. Let me explain that to you, but nothing else is really anything that you haven't seen here, and it just makes it that much quicker and easier to learn new systems. So that's one thing. If my players are getting to that point now, it's like we've played enough different things that it's easy. Every time we sit down to play something new, it's easier to get that lift.
Yeah. One of the people in my group is making his own system. That is, if you squint your eyes, it's GURPS.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's oversimplifying it, but it's definitely very much like you took GURPS and changed enough stuff that it's definitely its own system identity for how things work and mechanics, but that's where the basic chassis for it came from.
Yeah. When someone on the RPG subreddit is like, hey, I want to play something like GURPS, but it's not GURPS, then boom, you recommend that. It's like, hey, this isn't GURPS, but it's similar enough that, you might like it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I don't think there's usually people like that on the RPG subreddit, to be honest.
No.
Not for that specific system, but yeah,
No.
I get what you're saying there.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let's start talking about the world that we're here to talk about for your D&D stuff. So it's named, you spelled it here, but I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. Why don't you give us the name?
I don't know how to pronounce it either, but I say Aelriss.
Okay.
So, but essentially it's Earth. It's just Earth that a Lovecraftian apocalypse has happened on, and enough time has gone past that it's out of its apocalypse phase, and things have kind of reached equilibrium.
Okay.
Once again.
And where'd the name come from?
It sounded cool.
Okay.
There is nothing there. It was just, I just just started making sounds in my head, basically.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, I need a name for this, and I didn't want it to be Earth. And so I was like, oh, Aelriss, here we go. Sure. That was the first word I said in my head. I was like, okay, cool. I can't think of anything else that's named this, so we'll run with it.
Okay, good enough.
Yeah.
So it's not Earth, it's some other Earth-like planet after
Yeah,
the evil apocalypse.
well, the basic premise is in the medieval era, Earth chugging away just like it was for us, a Cthulhuian type entity, some sort of Lovecraftian eldritch horror. No one's really sure. Was it a meteor that struck the Earth? Did Cthulhu rise up from the deeps? No one really knows. What they do know is these eldritch beings that they call uh, the Fathomless. They came and rose up and remade the Earth to suit them, and then kind of started to go back to sleep. So they basically turned Earth into a water world with scattered islands that the remnants of humanity kind of rebuilt society from. So, but they were rebuilding it from a point of technology of the medieval era. So it's not like it's very much. That's the backstory. It's I did write this for D&D. This is the last world I created for D&D, and I actually created it. The whole point behind it was I wanted a in character reason why there would be small parties, like an actual reason why parties of adventurers would constantly be roaming this world. And I love water worlds. I wanted it to be a water world. I wanted these adventurers to have small ships going around. But I was like, well, I don't want bigger ships. I want it to all be small ships. So why are there only small ships? Well, because if the ship gets above a certain size, the leviathans of the deep will rise up and destroy them. So there it is. That's
I was gonna ask how an equilibrium had been established with eldritch horror, because it feels like that's somewhat counter to how that is.
Yeah, well, like I said, those gods have more or less, they're mostly slumbering. Now, their cults are definitely running around very openly. There are entire regions of this world that are run by these cults, but the beings that they worship have mostly gone to sleep. Like, their clerics can invoke them for powers, but Cthulhu's not roaming the earth remaking things in his image anymore. They rose up, remade the earth, and are now slumbering. But so that's broadly speaking one faction. Another major faction is when this world was remade, basically some small proto gods were birthed in the chaos, and they're called the Cardinal Vul, which means those who were born in silt. And these are the new gods, basically. And they tend to be more animalistic, like shark god, giant crab god, things like that. They are gods that reflect the new creatures of this earth. And then the other broad faction is all the old earth religions that have survived, but none of them survived intact. And they've all kind of been blended together into this soup of religion. And so there is no Catholic Church anymore. There is just the old faith, and Jesus is a saint, but he's not called Jesus. He's Jesu the Christ. You can see like the echoes and corruptions of how all these faiths they worship a series of saints, and these saints are all the gods of the old earth religions kind of blended together. into one amalgam.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and so those, broadly speaking, are there's tons of faiths within each of these, but
Yeah.
the religions are largely how the cultures divide themselves. There's also tons of different cultures, but religion is what binds cultures together
Hmm.
here.
Yeah.
Quite often, it's the most important element of who a person is. It basically defines where they stand in the world. So,
Yeah. I feel like that's true in our real world as well, and we've only
yeah,
started seeing some recent change in that in some parts of the world, but not
yeah.
ubiquitously
Oh,
for sure.
yeah, absolutely. But like me, I am pretty agnostic. That would not occur in this world. It's there are no there are no bystanders. There are it's a little bit different when gods are literally walking around more or less.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my thought on that is like it's harder to rationalize atheism or agnosticism in a world with concrete proof of those things.
Exactly.
It
When
does make faith a bit different, where it does become more contractual, like we used to think of faiths like 2,000 years ago.
yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit different when there are clerics that are actually performing magic granted to them by their gods. That
Hmm.
that yeah, I would be a little more apt to believe at that point.
Yes. So one of the key points that you had listed in your survey was that the resource scarcity, and you specifically mentioned metal, but I was curious if that applied beyond that to like wood and food, or has the arable land and the population kind of evened out at this point?
Yeah, so there's not a big problem with food. A lot of the diet has shifted to a more aquatic diet. A lot of
Of course,
fishing,
yeah.
things like that. Um, when it comes to wood, it's not super abundant, but it's not such a shortage that people are like, "Oh my God, we gotta be more careful." Because there are a few larger islands that do have uh, large forests on them,
Mhm.
and then also for shipbuilding, which obviously there would have to be a good bit of it. The ships tend to be smaller than you know. You aren't seeing these large, three-masted ships going around. At most, they have one mast, and so, but with metal, the issue is that there's only two iron mines in the world, uh, and one of them is controlled by uh, a the large basically there's a island about the size of Greenland, um, and it's the biggest island. They have an iron mine, and they're fairly expansionistic, uh, roughly analogous to Rome, I guess you could say.
Uh-huh.
And part of why they can be so uh, expansionistic is they have enough iron left over that they can use it to equip for weaponry. The other iron mine is on uh, a decently sized island that is off in a different part of the world. But most of that iron ends up getting used not for weapons. It's too valuable. It's used for essential tools and things of that nature.
Yeah. Nails.
Yeah, nails. So that kind of leads to, again, for the D&D side of things, one thing I really put in there was there are ruins. There are like old Earth ruins that are scattered about, and so I've written four short stories in this setting. Eventually, I'll add more, and there'll be a book
Mm.
of it. But for now, I got four stories, and one of the stories, one of these small ships is they're carrying a group of passengers that it was basically some minor nobles going on their honeymoon, more or less. And they're traveling back, and the bride, who's now seen a good bit of the world, she doesn't want to go back to this remote, rural sheep farming island. She's like, no, I don't want to go to this backwater. I don't care that I will be the wife of the lord who runs this island. It's kind of a crap island. I don't want to go back. So she like takes all their luggage and like throws it overboard in like a fit. And so the crew, they have to go in to the water and get the luggage. But when they do, when they swim down, they see the ruins of a tower. It could have been maybe part of a castle or something like that. They actually swim down there, and they find a small chest. Adventures ensue, yada yada yada. But the idea is that people do go looking for these old ruins because you can find metal there, and sometimes they find armor, or they might find might find a sword, or they might find some spear tips, things like that. So there, that was something. So there are warriors, some adventurers roaming the world with metal swords, but a lot of times they've been, recovered from old Earth ruins. But for those who don't have that, the idea was that they have found substitutes. A lot of, for one thing, most people don't really wear a lot of armor because a lot of the combat occurs on water, and you don't want a lot of armor with water. But what they do is they use like there are these giant crabs that take the chitin from these giant crabs and turn into armor, or shark hide to make like a leather substitute. And then like weapons,
turtle shells.
Yeah, stuff like that. Like, yeah, a turtle shell buckler is common. But then a lot of times they use like obsidian. The place that has the iron mine, that's not this evil empire, they also have a lot of obsidian. So obsidian weaponry is actually pretty common. Obsidian daggers, things like that. But then also, my dad worked in New Zealand for a few years, and he brought back a few Maori weapons. And so that were very cool. But one of them was basically a club with shark teeth in it. And so there, that was a big inspiration. So it's like, there are weapons like that, they're clubs with shark teeth in them, or just really nice clubs. Just people, humans are going to find a way to kill each other. Trust in nothing else. We will manage that. So we're real ingenuitive. So that was part of it. And really it was, I fundamentally was just like, y'all just use the PHB, pick whatever weapons you want. We're just going to use those rules just because we're old and getting older, and we're just trying to keep it simple here. But you do have to come up with a way to describe if it's an axe. Okay, I'm going to let you use rules for an axe, but tell me how is this shaped without using metal? And then anytime someone acquired a metal weapon, it was automatically masterwork. That was just how we did it. That was how we. Rather, because I've seen some folks say, oh, well, we'll just give all the improvised weapons basically neg 1. It's like, no, we'll just keep it base. Metal weapons are just innately masterwork. So that was how we did it to keep it simple.
I did have a question about, you've been mentioning iron as the metal, but like before iron, there was bronze. Is that...
There was, and I toyed with it, but I just didn't do it.
I guess part of the thing for bronze is it wasn't easier to find than iron. It was just easier to work with.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I'm not a metallurgist, and I don't know a ton about that. Like, I know the rough order by which these things came. But for me, that part was less interesting to come up with than like all the gods and stuff like that. So I spent more time
get it.
On the gods and cultures.
Like, if you have bronze and iron, it just kind of like, okay, there's two metals, but they're still controlled by these two places, and nothing really changes.
Yeah. No, absolutely. At some point, I do intend to like really flesh this out and put it out as like a source book. And when I get to that point, I will have to pay a lot more attention to things like that. Like I just basically made like a 20-page document that I could give to my players.
Mhm.
Like, here you go. Read it if you want. If you don't, like, read the first page. You got to read the first page.
Right. Yeah.
If you're interested, you can keep reading. Like, I have that kicking around, and at some point, I will expand it. You know, maybe actually turn it into a self-contained game, or I may just keep it a lore book. I don't know. I do really enjoy lore books. That's a much smaller market.
Yeah. I was curious if this is really the right setting for a D&D game necessarily.
It worked. The cool thing I did with it at the time was I was running two different groups,
Uh-huh.
and they each were the crew of a ship. They had to name their ship, and yada yada yada. And they were doing different adventures. I was not running the same adventure twice. It was two adventures, same world, going on at the same time. And the idea was that they would sporadically be. We would have the occasional like mega session where the two parties come together. We didn't get to that point because I ended up moving. So, but that was the plan. It's going to be real cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it worked fine as D&D. If I had it all to do over again, um, honestly, I probably would just use Morkborg for it. Now, I would just
Yeah.
tweak it a little bit. They have Pirate Borg. I would probably just use
Oh, yeah.
ship
Yeah,
rules
that
from
seems
Pirate Borg.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I would probably just use that instead because it's a little more thematic. And I don't know. I think it would fit pretty well. But like I said, it worked fine for D&D. It was just this was also getting near the time where I was just totally done with D&D. Like after this, I did two more campaigns I think of D&D, and then I have not run it in years now. So pox on all of its house.
Yes.
Wizards has I mostly like one I what my view on D&D is it's a great gateway for a lot of folks because it's easy to find parties, yada yada
Mhm.
yada. But pretty much whatever you want to do, there's a better system out there. It's it's a Swiss Army knife, but sometimes you need a chef knife, and
Uh-huh.
sometimes you need a hatchet, and sometimes you need a broadsword. And the Swiss Army knife is not going to it can get the job done, but you're going to have to work 3 times as hard when you should just go get the hatchet or the chef's knife.
Yeah.
And so at this point, I like to play chef knife games.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there are the D&D is designed for a group of 4 people that go into a dungeon and kill things in the dungeon. Like that's the original intention for the system, and I think it's still quite good at that. But yes, anything outside of that, it's not necessarily the best system. It just might be the one that requires the least amount of effort because it's
Yeah.
already in your pocket, to use the Swiss Army knife comparison.
Yeah. Well, it's also, like honestly, like most of the groups I've ever been in or been around or run, we end up not really doing that many dungeons.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Yeah.
uh which it really didn't fight that many dragons either.
Yep. Yeah, a
So,
lot of my more recent DMing stuff, so many of the encounters took place outside. It was
yeah.
all exterior stuff. There were a few dungeons, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I actually made a one-sheet RPG called Mount Madness where you play as the mounts that get left outside of a dungeon.
Okay.
And there's, it's a bunch of random things can occur, like, someone tries to steal you, um, or maybe y'all are just fed up with always getting left out, so y'all decide to go on an adventure of your own. But it's, you roll to see, are you a horse? Are you a riding dog? Are you, what type of mount are you? And then who is your who is your original owner? Like, what's the name of the adventurer that owned you? Because then that can kind of determine what might be in your saddlebags, you know. And then
Okay.
you just roll to see what kind of shenanigans now occur, and that's off to the races. So, I actually ran a live play of it on the Going to Now channel. That was a lot of fun. So it's a silly game, uh, and we had fun with it.
Have you heard of the dog RPG?
No, oh wait, Pugmire?
No, it's just
No,
called Dog, but it's
oh no,
DAWG.
no,
Um, it's where you play a dog and you're kind of trying to escape from your owner. Um, but then you have like compulsions that you have to go through. So like if your owner gives you a command, then you have to follow it, or you have to make a
yeah,
will save or follow it, like that kind of thing.
yeah, no. I'll have to check that out. It sounds kind of made me for a second there think of Everyone is John. Do you know that one?
Yes, I know that one. Yeah,
You
that's
have
that's the one sheet one that I'm most familiar with. I've run that one once or
Yeah,
twice.
we actually ran that for the first time about 2 months ago, and we just had an absolute blast with it. That was one I could not. I read that one sheet like 5 times, and it's like I just could not visualize how this was going to work. And I was like, "Look, guys, everyone loves this. We're just I know how it says we're supposed to play it. Let's just try it." And then once we started playing it, it was like, "Oh, it all kind of clicked for me." It's like, "Oh, this is a ton of fun."
Yeah, I think once you have the compulsions that each of the personalities are trying to do written out,
Yeah,
it makes much more sense. Like all the ridiculous things that people are trying to do.
yeah. I think I'm going to be running a live play of that at a convention later this year. So
Oh, that's cool.
we'll see how it goes.
Well, back to Aelriss. So you mentioned in the survey that there's also like underwater races that are now like come up out of the deep or have formed.
Yeah. So I had to come up with because we were playing D&D, I had to come up with well, I didn't have to, but um by the point I came around to this, depending on the group, it was either if it was a group I wasn't super familiar with, the rule was PHB only. You can
Mhm.
you can do whatever you want as long as it's in the PHB. I'm not going to limit you on race or class. If that's what you want to play, I'll make it work. Um, but it's got to be in the PHB. So for groups I was a little more familiar with, I would normally do just PHB +1, so they could draw from one other book, but I didn't want them to have to be flipping through like 4 different books for their characters. Like you can do PHB plus one other book, but that's it.
Uh-huh.
For character creation. So I had to come up with in game like, okay, what are are there dwarves? What's going on with dwarves? So I did dwarves and elves are just basically humans that have adapted to this new world. Um, a lot of merfolk, things like that, were humans that just got caught up in the changing nature of this world,
Mhm.
and now there are merfolk and tritons and you name it. But the main one that I did was I didn't want orcs. Um, I was fine with orcs like stat wise, like you could be a half orc, but I didn't want it to be a half orc. Why did I just arbitrarily decide that made perfect sense that humans could evolve into or be changed into merfolk and dwarves and elves, but orcs were a bridge too far? I don't know.
Uh,
Uh,
you
just
got to draw a line somewhere, right?
exactly. So I arbitrarily drew the line at orcs. What I did was I created a race called the Aeonis, which are basically shark people, but they don't have like fins. They are half orcs or orcs, and they are just typically they are slightly beefier, stronger humans. They tend to have grayer skin. It tends to be a little rougher, almost sandpapery at times. They have solid black eyes, but they are half orcs. But they say that they are shark blooded. And each clan of Aeonis has a type of shark that they adopt as their patron. And the rite of passage is you have to be considered an adult, you have to kill a shark of your clan to be judged worthy.
Okay.
So you really want to be part of the nurse shark clan and not part of the great white clan. But yeah, so that's kind of how it works, and they believe that they have a patron. There is an actual shark god that watches over them of their type. There's correction. They believe that there is one shark god. They just all argue over what type of shark he is. So Ghost Shark Clan believes that it's a ghost shark, etc. So they squabble over that. But yeah, that was kind of the one I put the most effort into. That wasn't just, hey, there's merfolk.
Uh,
It was, hey, I don't like orcs, so I came up with an elaborate way to not have to use them. So
all right. So you've got the cultist people in Lovecraftian lore. Sometimes it's someone who's making some sort of bargain, but a lot of times it's someone who's had their mind corrupted by looking at Cthulhuian horror or whatever, and that just breaks people. And I guess I don't really care which is which for what the cult is doing. I guess my broader question is, what is their goal at this point? Because it feels like mission accomplished. What more do you want?
right. Well, so they are, despite the fact that arguably their gods have already won. It's they would like for their gods to wake up. That's the thing about any sort of like Lovecraftian cult. They all want to wake up their god, but you just know it's going to go bad for them. It's just you just know that you're all going to die. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So part of it, there's an element of like, hey, we would like to more fully wake our gods up and let's purge all the non-believers off this planet. They almost nailed it. If we bring them back one more time, we can really just get this world just right, where only the true believers live here. But there is also just an element of there are absolutely true believers in here, but you just know humans going to human. There are people that they join just because they can live out the worst side of themselves.
Okay. Yeah.
There's just a lot going on with them. Some of them, and there are degrees of it. Kind of depends on who they worship. But some of them are a little bit more insidious, and they're trying to just corrupt islands and turn them to the faith. But then there are others that are like, no, let's just go, be pirates, basically. Let's just go be maddened reavers, like what was it, Firefly? I forget what they're called, the crazy pirate type folks that were out there just pillaging. Reavers? Did they call them reavers? I forget. Anyway, so there's some folks like that. And the thing about that is, like, the thing about mad dogs is they're real dangerous, but they tend to get put down. So a lot of these folks end up getting themselves removed because they're just so dangerous that people band together to eliminate these individual threats. But they are so scattered, and that's one element of this world is there's not a super fixed geography. There are some islands that are like touchstone islands that they don't move. It tends to be like the bigger the island, the more fixed in place it is. But a lot of these islands, they just move. So you can have, an island. Suddenly, their next door neighbor is a bunch of crazy, Lovecraftian worshiping cultists. and now you've got to deal with that. Whereas, 3 years ago, or a couple generations ago, there were like 5 islands around here that all worship the same god. Now there's only one island, you and your crazy neighbor. You just never know. And so there's an element of that. And there, because these islands do move around, other than um, that one like large Greenland style island that
Uh-huh.
is gradually expanding out, there aren't a ton of multi island kingdoms. There are a few, um, but and they tend to be large islands that are somewhat close together. But for the most part, every island is just that. It's an island. It runs itself. It's not part of some bigger kingdom.
So can they even really have trade if they're kind of moving around and the trade routes don't like stay established?
So they do have to get pretty much everyone has to get to a baseline of subsistence because
Yeah.
you never know. But that is part of it. Like the trade is somewhat limited because you cannot have large trading vessels. You're limited to these small ships, typically with a crew of 3 to 5 to 7 people. Um, and trade tends to be small-ish, high-value items that are universally appealing. If you are an island that is constantly just shifting around, you're probably not expecting to like send out a lot of ships of honey, shall we say? But you're like, oh hey,
Yeah.
um, we're moved. Our island is kind of moved over here. Let's sell to our neighbors, kind of deal. Sell to the surrounding area less so than, well, hey, we just happen to know that the Greenland island has a huge shortage of honey. Let's send some ships over there.
Hmm.
Because you never know. So, and also a lot of it, like a lot of these islands, they don't have most of these ships that are just roaming around. These adventurer ships,
Yeah.
they are a flag unto themselves. They don't tend to have like really a home port, or if they do, it is one of these big like fixed islands. So it's kind of they don't have to worry about like, oh well, a lot of what they do is just our ship will buy some honey here and we
Uh-huh.
will take it elsewhere and sell it there, less than, oh well, I'm a merchant on this island, I'm going to try and sell my stuff to this other island. That's not really how it tends to work. It tends to
Uh-huh.
be each ship is its own little merchant ship. And I wanted to, and like again, this is part of where the meta meets the lore. I wanted it to be to where every ship, it makes perfect sense for them to get involved in as many weird little things as the players wanted to get into. If they wanted to be merchants, they could be merchants. If they wanted to be a merchant this week, and then next week they wanted to hair off on an adventure, to go take over an island or go become pirates, they could. So that was a little bit. There's an element of that at play as well.
Gotcha. Wait, what is the actual campaign? You said you'd done two of them for the world, I think?
Yeah. So one of them, like I said, it didn't get super far. But the plan was that there was um, a secret organization, kind of think like the Harpers
Hmm.
from Forgotten Realms. That it was basically this world's version of the Harpers. They had a name. I forget the name. Um, they recruited this ship to kind of be one of their agents. Basically, tell them, hey, just kind of go do what you do. But along the way, like we want you to help us battle Fathomless influence. And there was going to be a plot that
And
was
Fathomless is one of those cults.
the cults. Yeah, all the cults collectively are called the Fathomless. The gods are
Okay.
called the Fathomless. The cults are called the Fathomless. Um, because I'm lazy, and
Oh, that's a good name.
so yeah, so but the idea was that there was kind of a rival evil organization, um, that was trying to start a war in this region because this region had very little Fathomless influence, and they were trying to get war to break out so that Fathomless could come in and take some of these islands. The first like arc of that was they end up getting this party ended up getting hired to deliver a statue to a an island, one of these larger fixed islands that had a king. And this was kind of just blind, terrible luck. They got hired by this evil cult without knowing it to deliver this statue. The statue came to life that night and started trying to murder its way through to the king. And so they end up having to come in and try and stop this, and then make the case like, "Hey, look, we tried to stop it. We really, you know, our bad. I know we delivered this, but we'll try and go track down, who actually built this statue," and it was off to the races. The other one, I started with them. They shipwrecked. They were lured onto an island by a party of breakers. Who breakers are folks that, and this used to be pretty common along the eastern seaboard. They would like fake lighthouses to like these communities would basically fake lighthouses to steer ships onto the rocks, and then they would basically loot the stuff that washed up on shore, and that's how these towns survived. So basically, this crew got hit by one of those. They got fooled into wrecking on this island because these folks were trying to get their loot. They end up the first few sessions were them running around on this island trying to escape it, and then of course this was a volcanic island, and we got to have a volcanic eruption, and wildness craziness ensues, and they eventually get a ship again, and they were just, this was kind of my core group, and I basically told them like, you can do whatever you want. I got little plot hooks. Like I had no big overarching adventure. It was just like, okay, if y'all head this way, I've got something for that. If you head this way, I got something for that. And they were kind of sort of getting mixed up. They kept having run-ins with this one Fathomless cult that was a little bit more. They were less the let's manipulate, and more the let's pirate. So they had some run-ins with that. It was a little more combat heavy of an adventure overall. So those were the two adventures I ran in it for the limited amount of times. This world ended up being a surprising amount of work for very little payoff. I've spent more time probably writing the world and short stories set in the world than time actually spent playing in the world.
Well, if it's fun, who cares?
Yeah, no, I love it. I like world building. I actually for a long time, or I say a long time, there was several years there where you could hire me as a freelance writer to world build for your video or board game, and I did so much of that for years, and I absolutely loved it. And I've done it for myself. Pretty much, I when I started with D&D, I started in Forgotten Realms and kind of realized I didn't really. I loved the depth of Forgotten Realms and how fleshed out it was, but I didn't really like the setting itself. And so from that point on, I just started creating my own settings, and so I've created, God, at this point, a dozen different settings, I guess, of varying degrees of fleshed out. The first one I ever used, I wrote half a novel set in it. So, it's to then others, I created it for the setting was just one island, one large island, for a kind of a dark fantasy campaign. So they range the gamut from entire worlds to just let's go all in on this one island or one region for a campaign.
So you said there was like one main one and a second one. for Aelriss, and the second one was smaller.
Or yeah.
Did you feel like you got to explore different things with the second one than the first one that you wanted to?
Uh, a little bit. Because they were set in different areas of the world.
Hmm.
And one one aspect of this world that I kind of tried to play with is um that there is a surprising amount of science that folks are trying to perform. Like it's very, early, like think like Galileo. There's a bunch of folks out there like Galileo that are really trying to get a handle on the natural world and the orders of
Mm.
the stars. And so astronomy is a big thing as well. And so one group, um the second one, there's a smaller one, they ended up kind of doing some odd jobs for I forget her name. The isle was the region was called Della Porto, I think, and it was loosely inspired by like medieval Italy. Um, and there was the Donna who ran it. She was a scientist and astronomer, um, who was trying to get just a handle on the natural world. So I got to kind of play around a little bit with that. While with the other group, it was I got to play around with. I have these things called sea towers. They're basically just floating lighthouses almost, and there's 9 of them. They're fixed. They don't move around. These are actually, but they just float in the water basically. Like it's clearly magic.
Uh-huh. Kind of
But
like an iceberg building kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah. It's like it's just these. There are these. No one knows who made them. I think I said that there's 9. 8 of them are like no one knows who made them, and then one wizard managed to make kind of a bootleg version of one. It's not as
Okay.
nice. Um, and
Okay.
so, but these sea towers, they exist out there. And so I got to play around with those. I think they ended up visiting 2 of them. One of which was a diviner had taken over, and he had a Nothic living with him, which is kind of a divining D&D monster of sorts. And then the other was basically like an inn. Like this family had basically been living in the sea tower for generations, and they had kind of built docks and stuff off of it. So it was kind of like an inn trading post of sorts. So I got to explore more of that. So yeah, I got to explore different areas. Um, One group had an Aeonis in it, so I got to do a little bit with that. Um, and then one of them, the biggest city in the world, is called uh, Mordrin, I believe. It's the city built into a dormant volcano. It's a dwarven city,
Uh-huh.
but it's the biggest city in the world, biggest single city in the world. Um, I think there's like 100,000 people living here,
Wow.
all
That
in this
feels really
in
big
this
for
area.
this time period.
Yeah, no, it is. It's phenomenally big. And so did I go in depth into how they feed these people? No, no, I didn't. Shoddy world building.
Oh.
Readily, I'll readily own that. But I wanted my water deep, basically.
Mhm.
So this was the water deep. And so they got to go there and they got to see how it is uh in the volcanoes where the dwarves live, and that is kind of kept separate. And then anyone who's not dwarven, they live on like the side of the volcano, down stretching to the docks and whatnot. So, because this is like the dwarven homeland. Um, so, but it's also like a trading center because this is the other place that has an iron mine. So, um, it's it being one of the few places that can get iron to the general. It's really the only place the general public can access iron, I guess you could say, if you've got the money. Um, so
I'm looking up the population of London as a comparison for 100,000,
yeah,
and it was not at 100,000 until like 1500, so well after the medieval
yeah,
age.
well, yeah, well after, yeah, I I have never set the exact year. I really, really, really wanted. At one point, I was dead set on it was going to be set during the uh, Vlad the Impaler
Okay.
was alive when this happened, and that he was actually a vampire, and that he's still around. But that was just too late. At that point, there was black powder, there were cannons. I didn't want any of that in this
Mhm.
world,
Yeah.
so I had to wind it back. Unfortunately, so no Vlad the Impaler running around.
Yeah, he's really after the medieval age. He's at the
Yeah,
start of the Renaissance.
yeah. So unfortunately, no vamp. I really like the idea of Vlad the Impaler as a actual vampire pirate lord, but this wasn't to be. Just wasn't to be.
There's a specific piece of Vlad lore that I've followed,
Yeah.
maybe more than I should, where there's a sword that he was said to have used, which is the sword of Mars. It was used by Attila. It was used by Joan of Arc, Charlemagne before her, and a Duke of Bavaria at some point,
Okay.
Duke Otto of Bavaria. And Vlad was supposedly one of the other wielders of that sword.
Huh. I'm gonna have to look this up. I love. One thing I do is I make a lot of like shirt designs that I just throw up on print on demand websites, and
Uh-huh.
either they sell or they don't.
Right.
One of my best selling shirts is I made a shirt based on Countess Bathory, um, and it's Bathory Bodyworks,
Okay.
and that's it's got an outline of a person in a tub, but it's all in like blood red. Um, it it's one of my all time best selling shirts. So
Yeah, that's
um,
funny.
yeah,
Did you watch the Van Helsing TV series?
I haven't. Someone was literally 2 weeks ago was telling me I really need to watch that. So I may have to actually get around to that because now that two people have said it in 3 weeks, I feel like maybe that's a sign.
Um, I really enjoyed it. I feel like the final season has some problems, but I definitely really enjoyed the first three seasons.
Yeah. And this is the anime, or
No,
or is it? Oh, okay.
no, this is not. I mean, the anime is good too. No, this is the sci-fi uh,
Oh,
real life action one.
oh, okay. No, I have not checked that out. Um,
Okay, yeah, it's the premise for it is that a the Yellowstone volcano erupts, then
yeah,
sends ash up into the air throughout the world,
yeah.
which makes it dark. So now all the vampires can come out during daytime because there's not really enough sunlight to burn them anymore.
Ah,
So vampires come out and start going crazy and kill everyone. So in addition to whatever the Yellowstone eruption does, now there's vampires everywhere.
yeah.
Um, when that happens, the last heir of Van Helsing goes into a coma. Just coincidentally at the same time when and then she gets trapped in a hospital and is just in a coma for like I think it's supposed to be 3 years. Um, while a Marine is watching over her and keeping her safe because he was ordered to keep her safe because the government knows that she's the last heir to the Van Helsing line, so she's important for dealing with all these vampires.
Yeah.
But since then, the command structure is broken down, so now the Marine has no orders. He's just hanging out, following his last order. 3 years later, she wakes up from the coma. Um,
And
then they have to
now,
figure
yeah.
out what the hell to
Okay.
do with her, how she's useful. Um,
Yeah. Okay, that's a really cool premise. I actually worked up a one of the first worlds I built. Never did anything with it, other than just world build. Was
uh,
I designed a pit fighting tabletop game that was based around it. It was not very good. But the idea was that humans have been seeded on planets
Yeah.
all over the universe,
Hmm.
and vampires have basically have travel in the wake of they vampires have seeded humans throughout the universe,
Okay.
and they are traveling in these massive world ships in the wake of the planets they've seeded. And what they do is they harvest these human planets before humans develop psychic abilities, because psychic abilities are the only thing that can kind of level the playing field.
Okay.
Um, and so Earth, the vampires that had been like stationed on Earth to kind of prepare it and send the signal like, "Hey, we're ready to harvest,"
Hmm.
they actually got killed off due to freak events. So the signal never goes off. Humans develop on Earth develop psychic powers.
Mm.
They're able to. I mean, they still lose, but a lot of them end up fleeing to this area of space that vampires can't enter into because of the UV properties of the sun. I don't know. It was some, uh, 16-year-old me was like, oh, yeah, they can't go there because space reasons. Um,
Okay. Sure.
but they also the vampires had
They're
developed.
not invited to that solar system, so they can't go
Yeah,
in.
yeah. It was supposed to be something like the U. It was a different sort of UV radiation or something like that
Okay.
was instantly fatal to vampires. So I don't know. But then the vampires had also developed werewolves as their to be their shock troops. So this pit fighting game was you could play as either a psychic human that had been captured, a vampire, or a werewolf, and they were all supposed to be roughly equal. They all had strengths, weaknesses,
Okay.
abilities, yada yada yada, and you fought, and it was not great. So, but
It's a
I enjoyed.
fascinating setting. It feels like a sort of a
Yeah,
waste to have it be pit fighting for what you're
I
doing.
know. Oh, I was real big into Warhammer at this point. At some point, like I don't know, it's one of those. I have so many worlds and stuff sitting around. Like I will never have enough time to do anything with all these. But this one being one of my earlier worlds, it does kind of hold a little special place in my
Uh-huh.
heart. So
Yeah.
maybe one day I will do something with it. But that day is not today, and not really anytime soon. So
Yeah. Reminds me of there was a short story on Reddit that I read that like on the writing prompts subreddit
Mhm. Yeah.
about um aliens invading Earth and like the humans getting all like wiped out and having to hide. Um but then uh vampires ended up being the way to fight back.
Yeah.
So there was a bunch of vampires that got made by one vampire and then they all rushed
I
the
like it.
aliens and took over the alien ships and like went to the alien empire
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
back.
I do enjoy me some vampires. So.
Yeah, very well. There's something about it that's had it stick around for so many years as a storytelling device.
Yeah. There's an interesting learned about this. I was doing a panel at JordanCon
Hmm.
this year, and it was the panel was about zombies in space. Anything to do with zombies in space, and
Yeah.
we we're talking away. I was actually on that panel with Bill Bridges, who was one of the original guys who wrote for White Wolf.
Okay.
He wrote a lot of the stuff, the original stuff for Werewolf. Um,
Hmm.
Anywho, so like I'm a little starstruck. So anyway, so I'm there. We're doing this, and someone from the crowd asked if we knew about this, and then we none of us had ever heard of it, but we looked it up, and it apparently did hold true. But there was someone looked, and the popularity between vampires and zombies is cyclical. Like when vampires are more popular, zombies are less popular,
Oh,
vice
the
versa.
political theory that goes with
And
it.
yeah, and it ties
Yeah.
to politics. And we looked, and it up until Trump, it absolutely held true that the party in power correlated. I think it was when Democrats were in power, vampires were more popular, and when Republicans were in power, zombies were more popular.
Yeah, I
And
think that's yeah.
absolutely mapped for many, many, many presidential cycles. So neat.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting as well.
Yeah.
And I think the disruption with Trump probably has more to do with COVID than anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't be sure of that, but I feel like that changed the approach to zombie movies in a very large way,
Yeah.
and zombie stories, because now there's like, okay, so here's how people actually react to a very large pandemic in the modern world, and
Right.
how do we reframe our stories for that?
Yeah. No, to me the cool thing that came out of COVID when it comes to horror was the dramatic uptick in like socially isolated horror, where it's horror that takes place on a Zoom
Oh,
call or
did
in a
you
chat
see those
room.
horror
That,
movies? There was a few that came out about
yeah,
like I think it was the Korean ones.
yeah. There. I saw one that was it was I don't know what chat program. It was basically folks in a chat room. Um, they were getting together in this chat room to commiserate the death, like the 1 year anniversary of the death of one of their friends, and then um, the the login of the dead friend logs into the chat room, and
Uh-huh.
they all start freaking out, and then like links to YouTube videos are popping up, and yada yada yada, and it's like people start dying. It was really really cool. So like, uh, you know, horror people use horror to process, and so the uptick in horror that took place totally virtually like that was really cool to see. It was to me it was the most one to one seeing people process the trauma in their lives so rapidly and so blatantly, I guess you could say. I don't know. It was to me that was really fascinating, and I'm sure there's some academics that have written some really cool papers on it, but I haven't read them. So
Yeah, I think it is some cool stuff that we're learning about, not just disease but like society from the reaction to that we
yeah,
weren't necessarily able to really record it and recognize it the same way from like the Spanish flu from the last big pandemic we had.
yeah, yeah. What a time to be alive.
Yeah. The movie I was thinking of was called Alive, and it was actually the script was used for two movies. There's another one called Alone, where it's about like the zombie outbreak happens. Well, this guy is like a internet streamer,
Yeah,
so it happens while he's in his house streaming, and then he gets calls from his family about what's happening, and he's like stuck inside and can't go out because like his neighbor's a zombie now.
yeah,
So he's trying to get water, food,
yeah,
and then in the apartment complex across from him, he sees there's someone else alive over there. So he ends up trying to communicate with her, and they organize to meet up.
yeah. I love it. I love it. It's my favorite. Or my favorite type of horror movie is anything with a giant creature eating people.
Uh-huh.
Jaws, Lake Placid, Anaconda, anything like that.
Cloverfield.
Yeah, I enjoyed Cloverfield. But then the my other favorite is found footage, and this is basically just a more modern style of found footage, and
Mhm.
I love those. So and
Yeah,
Cloverfield was both found footage and big critter eating people.
yeah,
So
yeah. The sort of streaming aspect was definitely a part of the shots they used.
yeah, yeah, I like it. I enjoy it.
There was another one. It was a Spanish one. It was about this is completely separate from what we're
No,
talking about now. This is just like a random apocalypse movie that I think you'd like. Um, it was a Spanish one about. It was called Los Últimos Días, the final days.
okay,
And it was about a pandemic that causes severe agoraphobia. So, and everybody was infected eventually, and it made it so you could not go outside. If people went outside, they would get so scared they would have a heart attack.
Ooh.
Um,
Oh.
so when it hits everybody, like it's during a work day, so everyone's like stuck at work,
Yeah.
and it's about this guy trying to get to his girlfriend, like back to their apartment. Um, and it's months afterwards, during those months where they've been surviving on somehow on food that's in the work office. They've been digging a hole into the subway system through the basement.
Ah, smart. Smart.
So then
I like
they
it.
once they get the hole, then everyone splits off to go throughout the rest of the city and he, goes to find his girlfriend.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. Sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, and there's a big monster in it too. It's not a supernatural monster, but still.
I'm here. I'm here for it. I'm
Yeah.
here for it.
And of course, any good apocalypse setting has cannibals, so there's a bit of that too.
You know, you know, you, you can't keep a thick, luscious figure like mine in the apocalypse unless you're prepared to eat a little long pig. So,
Okay, there you go. Well, was there anything else about Aelriss that you wanted to talk about?
no, I think we pretty well covered it. I think we hit all the points I was trying to get across with it. So it was fun. If someone listening to this is like, oh man, this sounds really cool, I would absolutely love to run a session of this. I'll send you like my 20-page lore document. Like, just reach out, go to my talesbybob.com, just message me. I'll send it to you. And then maybe one day you'll be able to buy an actual lore book for it, maybe even a game. Who knows? Um, I can all but guarantee you will eventually be able to read short stories set in this world that'll be in print. Like I said, I've got 4 of them done, but four short stories does not a collection make. So,
No, no.
when,
I think
when I-
the shortest anthology I've seen is 8.
yeah, yeah,
Even
yeah,
then, they're
yeah.
they're big. Those are big short stories.
Yeah, yeah. So I have toyed with the idea of writing novellas that are set around different crews going about
Mhm.
getting into shenanigans. But like I said, I've got so many ideas and only so many hours in the day. So
Yeah.
this is 8, 9 places down on the list. So
Right, right. Well, I always close off with asking for you to give advice for any other DM. So what advice would you give?
my my biggest piece of advice is do what makes you happy. And I don't mean like be mean to your players so that makes you happy. I mean that in the type of game that you choose to run. If your players all like to be murder hobos, but your real joy in life is political intrigue, um, that's just a miserable way to spend your life of RPGs. So you may have
Yeah.
to find a new group, or you may have to be like, you know what, guys, look, I'm the one who puts in all the effort. So we're going to play a game that I want to play, and we're going to play um, whatever. We're going to play Blades in the Dark, guys. I know that y'all have been so dead set on D&D, but I got to go where my heart sings. And yeah, you may lose some players, but I would rather um, play super sporadically, but play something I really, really love than play every week and it be D&D, which I hate at this point. Um, because it's just do what makes you happy. You're the one putting in the work. Do what makes you happy. That's because if you're miserable, it's going to show through. Um, everyone's going to suffer eventually. So why not do what makes you happy so that you're having the most fun possible, and that will translate into your game, I believe.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good advice. Yeah, you're as much a player and having fun as everyone else, and you deserve
Yeah.
to be having a good time.
Yeah. And when a bunch of you try this and your books shatter and you can never find another group, my name is Jim Nettles, not Bob Magoo. Don't
Uh,
don't 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 message me. It was some other guy.
That I remember that from tours I would take. Tour guy would say, if you've enjoyed this ride, my name is Isaac Shaker. If you haven't enjoyed it, my name is Jim Nettles.
Yeah, exactly. And Jim Nettles is actually a really good friend of mine. He's a great dude.
Okay.
So I absolutely used his real name on that one. So enjoy, Jim.
A little shout out.
Yeah, a little shout out to Jim Nettles, who has done some live play stuff with me, and just a great dude. But yeah, if you hate that advice, I'm sorry, but it's what I do, and it's working for me. So hope it works.
All right. Well, thanks, Bob. It was good having you on the show.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. Anytime I get to talk world building is a good day in my book.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I've seen a lot of growth in the show over the last few months, and I'd like to keep it going. You can help by rating and reviewing the show on your favorite podcast app, telling a friend, or by telling any game masters you know to send in a survey to be on the show. You can find that survey at gocorral.com/STS. That's GOCORRAL.com/STS.